Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Favorite Albums Through the Decades. Once again, in the co-captain's chair, 2 days in a row, Mr. Sean Tonar. What's going on, Sean? How are you?
Hey, Pete. How are you doing? It's a pleasure to be back. Thank you.
Glad to have you back. Sean's been on the channel quite a bit this week. We did our fabulous multi-instrumentalist show on In the Prog Scene on Tuesday, which if you haven't seen it, please go check it out. That was really, really cool. Yesterday we did Steely Dan. Today we've got the Electric Light Orchestra, or as some people like to call them, ELO for short. I don't know about you, Sean. I have been into this band since the late 70s. When I was a boy, I listened to a lot of ELO to reference a song from one of their later albums. And, even though I have throughout most of my life been a hard rock and metal fan, first and foremost, I've always also been a prog rock lover as well. I have always had a place in my heart for this band, always. And there's just something about them that has appealed to me instantly as a probably 11-year-old kid. And I just never lost that love for this band. Jeff Lynne is a genius, the great songwriter, multi-instrumentalist who somehow we didn't think of last night. We did that way the other night. We did that show. And I especially love the classic period with all of the strings and the synthesizers and the great melodies. And, his love of the Beatles obviously shines through. Bev Bevan's drums. By the way, Bev Bevan is going to be on the show in 2 weeks, everybody. So figured I'd announce it now during this show. I completely forgot about that.
Got to talk about Born Again with him.
Oh, I am. Yeah, we're going to talk about ELO. We're going to talk about Black Sabbath, and we're going to talk about Bev's more recent projects that he's been doing. So, but that's for another day. So we've got the 70s, the 80s, and the 2000s. We've decided to lump the 3 albums that have come out since 2000, put them together, and pick a favorite out of that. So I'll have Sean kick us off with the 70s.
Wow. Well, that's a toughie because that's where the bulk of their work was. And, they changed quite a bit over the course of 3 or 4 albums, actually. Early on, they were a partnership between Roy Wood and Jeff Lynne on that first record, the one with the light bulb on the cover of it. And after that, Roy split pretty quickly and he started his own group called Wizard, which is pretty cool if you like Roy Wood stuff. And Jeff was kind of left to steer the ship himself. And that's probably just as well, because I think they would have butted heads sooner or later anyway, because it's just too many chiefs. So, early on, the orchestral part of it, I think, was even more dominant. I think as the 70s wore on, the orchestral stuff kind of less and less. By the time you get to Discovery, there isn't a whole lot of orchestral touches on it at all. So the album I'm going to choose is one that straddles the line between the early orchestral period and the later, more commercial poppy stuff. And that would be El Dorado. And, this is one that it only has one big hit on it. I can't get it out of my head. But what's nice about this is it flows like an orchestral piece of music, pretty much. This is one where Jeff Lynne's dad, I don't think, really thought a whole lot of the albums he'd made up to that point. And he was like, I'm going to write one that's going to impress you this time. And this is what he did. And just the way these songs segue and flow, it's just one of the grandest moments in the catalog. And because of that, I choose this one. It's a little less obvious than some of the more commercial ones, but it's satisfying on a different level. It doesn't just feel like a collection of songs put together. It feels like a bunch of pieces that are meant to flow, from one to the other. A few particular favorites are Laredo Tornado and Mr. Kingdom. A couple of really cool ones. So yeah, that's my pick, El Dorado, with the weird cover that has nothing to do with the album, which trying to pull the ruby slippers off there. From what I understand, they added this because they figured Americans, it would click with them, because it was something that we all watched on TV every year.
Yeah, the whole Wizard of Oz thing. Yeah, exactly.
So interesting. Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the choice that a lot of the progressive rock fans who are watching will probably make. I think when I talk to most serious prog rock fans, they tend to gravitate towards that album more than some of the others. And I can kind of see why. The classical nature of that album is up front and center. And it's a pretty challenging affair to start to finish musically, I think. It's an excellent choice. There's so many good ones.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
even, you hinted at the early stuff, which I think, for anybody who followed the move back in the day. So Roy and Jeff and Bev decided to go and put this band together, and I think those first couple albums, them trying to figure out exactly what they wanted to do. They took some bits from the move, and they had some Beatles moments, and then they had this kind of like avant-garde chamber rock classical thing, kind of like, which sometimes you listen to those first couple albums and you're like, all right, that's really different. You got the cello up front and center just out on its own, and not a lot of keyboard work, and really pretty different albums, I think. And I think for me, it wasn't until On the Third Day that I think they started to kind of figure out the direction they were going. That's got some fine stuff. Then you got El Dorado, where it all made sense, and then Face the Music kind of took those elements from El Dorado, but they started to write more pop and song-based material.
Sure.
Like,
That was the one where they had their big hit with Strange Magic, which was probably their first big pop hit here in the US anyway.
Yeah.
And what else was on there? Evil Woman, which was a huge hit for them.
Yep.
And one of the simplest songs in the catalog. I mean, it's like, I actually have the pleasure of playing bass in an ELO tribute here called Strange Magic here in Atlanta. And yeah, that's kind of my song where I get to rest. I got to save my energy for Last Train to London, man, because that is a workout.
I love Last Train to London.
It's super fun, but man, pumping them disco octaves for 5 minutes straight, it'll wear your hand out.
I can imagine. For me, though, I'm going to go with the first album I ever bought from this band, and I still love it to this day. I remember being a young kid, walking into J&R Music World in New York City with my dad, and seeing that I had no idea who this band was, seeing that giant spaceship on the cover. It was a double album, so I think it was $7.99. I had just enough money. I said, you know what? I love spaceships and science fiction, and I don't know what this band is all about, but I love this cover, so I'm going to buy Out of the Blue. And I did. And I remember, like, opening that up, that gatefold, with the inside of the spaceship, and then you had the fold out poster and the lyrics, and then you had the listing of the band members. And I remember, like, Jeff Lynne and Richard Tandy's list of instruments that they played is like a novel. I mean, it's if they told you every little thing that they played on the album. And I was like, I just fell in love with this band. And then I went out and worked my way back, and then I bought a New World Record when it came out, and that just started my lifelong love affair with this band. And this, to me, is one of my favorite double albums of all time. It's a mix of that classical stuff that he loves, his love of the Beatles, a lot of pop stuff on here. You get a hinting of the kind of disco rhythmic stuff that they would really move into going forward. Discovery was the next album after this. I think that's what I mentioned. That's what I should have said before. Discovery is the one that I bought after this when it came out, but A New World Record was the one I picked up right after I got this. And I mean, just so many great songs on here. Turn to Stone, Sweet Talking Woman, Night in the City, Jungle is a lot of fun, Stepping Out. Then you got the Concerto for a Rainy Day, which I think is absolutely awesome. Standing in the Rain, Mr. Blue Sky, The Whale, Birmingham Blues, all sorts of flavors and textures on this album. It's just still a really fun album, and one of my favorite, like from a production standpoint, one of the most gorgeous sounding albums I've ever heard, I think.
That's great. Yeah. And Mr. Blue Sky is the happiest song ever. And how can
if you're ever down in the dumps, folks, man, just put on Mr. Blue Sky. That will just dissipate real quick.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So
all right, the 80s. Here we go.
One. I had how I got into these guys. It was around when I was like 13, and they were kind of my prog gateway drug, I'd say. They were kind of the first pompous band I got into, and that led to Yes and Rush and all that a few years later. And I remember I got a box set that had New World Record, Discovery, and Out of the Blue all in there together, which was a really good way to start.
Oh yeah, that's a great way to start, actually.
Yeah, and then right around that time, the Xanadu movie came out, and we, it was geared towards 12-year-olds.
Yep.
So whatever.
A couple good tracks on that soundtrack, though.
Yeah, well, it's two sides. One side is Olivia Newton-John's writers. Her that big hit Magic, which is probably her best pop song. And then on side two, it's all ELO. And I liken that second side of Xanadu to basically like the third side of Discovery. Like if Discovery kept going, that's what you'd get next.
Yeah.
So if you like Discovery, I'd say check that album out, because the movie gets a bad rap. I'm sure the Coke budget was out of this world. It was 1979, but forget the movie. Although Olivia Newton-John was absolutely adorable. So, maybe you ought to just kind of tough your way through it and watch it.
Anyway. Yeah, I mean, the music is pretty good, actually.
It's late 70s camp at its finest.
It totally is. And, I want to defend Discovery for a second here before we move on to the 80s, because I enjoy Discovery quite a bit. And granted, it's a lot of the ELO elements that we came to love throughout the 70s are kind of gone by that point. I still think the songwriting is amazing. That is such a catchy album. There are so many great songs on that album.
Sure. Shine a Little Love. I mean, that's such a big earworm, And
Horace Wimp and Don't Bring Me Down and Last Train to London. I mean, there's a lot. And, I love Richard Tandy's keyboard work on that album.
Yeah. And there's some great deep cuts like Midnight Blue and Confusion.
Confusion. Great song.
Yeah, that's great. So
yeah, I got a lot of love for that album. I like it quite a bit.
I do too. I mean, I understand people's issues with it, but those issues don't bother me personally. So 80s. Well, this takes me back. I guess this is the first one that came out once I was a fan, and it is called Time. And for some people, they kind of bounce back from Xanadu with this album. This is a concept album about the future. And listening to it now, it's kind of quaint because it has all these 8-bit computer keyboard sounds that sounded so futuristic in 1981 and sounds so square and dated now. But at the time, this is a glimpse at the future from, 1981. And I guess the big single is Hold On Tight, which is, Jeff has many 50s rock pastiches in the ELO catalog, and that's yet another one. And really, it's unlike anything else on the record. The rest of the record's kind of this 80s symphonic kind of pop record with, big 80s keyboard sounds. And that song is kind of like an anomaly. I think it's the last song on it. It's almost like Jeff knew. It's like, okay, let's throw that at the end because it's so out of style with the rest of it. But Twilight, I think, is one of the greatest tunes on here. That's like a little epic. And Ticket to the Moon, that's a wonderful tune with a very sad lyric because basically they're not coming back from the moon. It's a one-way ticket. So yeah, really, really cool stuff. And after this, I think they got a little too drum machine-y. So although the next one, Secret Messages, actually has some interesting stuff on it that's pretty good. It's the one after that is a little too over the top with the drum machines. I forget what it's called. The one that has Rock and Roll is King on it.
Yeah, Balance of Power.
Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah.
So, what do you got?
I'm in agreement. I am not a huge fan of any of these three albums, but I enjoy this one more, I think. And ironically, what's interesting is that they decided, or like Jeff decided, I guess, to kind of go with that whole futuristic theme and a lot of the futuristic sounds on this album, which ironically, doesn't really contain the spaceship on the front, right? Because you would think there'd be more of that stuff on the early albums and not really. So this is almost the album in the ELO catalog that just had to happen at some point. It's just interesting that he waited so long to kind of go there. But I think that, there's a lot of tracks on here. It's a pretty cool concept overall. And I like the production on the album. Do I miss the strings? Yeah, but there's a wealth of synthesizers on here and all sorts of kind of cool like blips and bleeps and things. Yeah, there we go.
Well, something's different when Jeff's sporting a goatee.
Yeah.
It's like the strings are gone and so is my mustache.
So is my mustache, yeah.
Which is never lose the sunglasses.
No, you're absolutely right. Even on the more recent stuff, he's always got those. Crazy. But yeah, but overall, it's a fun album. I dig it. I don't like it nearly as much as the 70s stuff.
I don't either, but it's definitely the best of the 80s.
I agree. Yeah, I like moments on Secret Messages and Balance of Power. I don't think I like either one of them much all the way through. Like there's certain tracks I dig, the rest of it I can kind of do without. And to me, like those albums just seem like the direction he was going to go in working with the Traveling Wilburys. Those seeds are already kind of happening on those two albums. I'm not a big fan of the Traveling Wilburys, but Time, I think for me, still has enough of the ELO of the 70s that we always loved. And so that's my pick for this particular decade.
Very cool.
So now the 2000s. So we got three of them. We're going to lump them all together and make a choice here. This was kind of tough. We talked about this before we went live, right. And because they're all really similar in a weird way. And
they all have that kind of post Wilburys kind of feel.
Laid back and just kind of
it's all about a wall of strummy guitars and maybe a little orchestral flourishes. I think there's a little more on the second one, From Out of Nowhere, than there was on Alone in the Universe. Although there's a few moments here and there, but it's not as, it's like I was listening to it and go, well, where's the orchestra, man? It still says ELO, but I don't hear much in the way of strings on here. So but that said, he still writes some great songs, that are uniquely his. And there's a few moments on each one of these that are unlike anything in the rest of the catalog. So, there is some growth here a little bit. It's not just a throwback to the other albums, I don't think.
Yeah, it's definitely not that. Yeah.
So I'm going to go with the most recent one, which is called From Out of Nowhere. And that it was the big single that's on it. There's some others on there I really like. There's one called All My Love that I think is a beautiful tune. I'm Losing You. That's almost like a Roy Orbison ballad. And, Jeff was a huge Roy Orbison fan. And a really fun one called Sci-Fi Woman. That's pretty fun. Almost reminds me of Hi-Fi Mama from ZZ Top. So that would be my pick.
And great album covers on these new ones. I mean, Zoom, this one, and I went with Alone in the Universe, which is the one from previously. And I think it's cool on all of these that he's got, he's got his Les Paul, right? His trusty Les Paul in the back, which is good. But, not a lot of like electric guitar on these albums. You get some cool chords here and there. You know what I think I miss the most? You mentioned missing the strings, and that's a given. I miss some of Richard Tandy's kind of keyboard textures. That's another given. But I think more than anything else, I miss the presence of Bev Bevan on these albums.
I do too, because Jeff is not the drummer that Bev is.
No, not even close. And when he throws in the electronic drums, it's just like, but all the old classic albums had that. I mean, Bev is like this big, heavy hitting, kind of like John Bonham type of presence. And I think that was a characteristic of all the old ELO material. Even the mellow poppy songs had that thunderous drumming going on behind it, and man, it's not the same without that.
It just kind of feels like the bare minimum now to make the song work at all.
It's like a painting that has it's all the pencils and you're missing all those like kind of bright colors, or the other way around, you got the colors and you don't have that background, you don't have the sketch. I don't know. It's just, it's missing something. And the more I think about it, the more it's like, I'm just missing Bev. I've always loved his drumming, and he's not like he's the most technical player ever, but he's got a feel. He's got this heavy handedness that I think really adds a lot to anything he's ever worked on.
I agree. And without it, it's just, I don't know, it comes off a little light, I guess.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell him that in 2 weeks when I talk to him. But
yeah, man, because it's just,
I'm sure, I know there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that went on.
I'm sure it's easy for Jeff to just stay at home and do it all himself. But it's another thing that kind of bugs me about these records is he uses auto tune, and he doesn't like slather it on where it sounds like he's warbling like this, but it's enough to make you go, come on, you're a great singer with good pitch. Did you really need to do that?
Yeah.
I think it's just a modern production sound that a lot of people use because it's the flavor of the decade.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think that's a good way to go for a band like this.
I agree with you.
I mean, it isn't
just because everybody's using it doesn't mean you should, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it isn't, like I said, it's not piled on too thick, but there's just enough that you kind of go, no.
Yeah.
So 70s great, 80s not too bad. Later on, we're glad you came back and did something, Jeff.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. We're happy to have it, right?
Yeah.
But is it something I'm going to listen to over and over and over again? Yeah, maybe not. But enjoyable enough. When I Was a Boy is really good. Dirty to the Bone kind of wants to rock a little bit, one step at a time. Title track, Alone in the Universe. I mean, it's like we said, it's pleasing on the ears. I love the art and all that kind of stuff because it gives you that feel of the 70s albums, but not quite enough. Not enough strings. No Richard Tandy much to speak of, if at all. In fact, most of these not. I know he plays with them live occasionally or whatever, but and then missing Bev in a big way. Yeah. But it's better to have some Jeff Lynne ELO than none at all, I think.
And the one Zoom isn't bad, and George Harrison guests on that on a couple tracks, playing some beautiful slide. So that one's worth checking out too.
Yeah, it's not bad. For whatever reason, I mean, when it came out, I was massively disappointed in this when it came out. I think my impression of it over the years has softened a bit. I still don't love it, but it's just like all of these. They're almost interchangeable.
That's when he tried to reboot the band, but he kind of did it on the cheap with a smaller lineup. Yeah. And, it just wasn't as cool as what he did a few years ago with the bigger budget and a bigger ensemble,
Yeah. So. But, the band still occasionally plays live. If you haven't checked out that Blu-ray that they released, I don't know, a year or two ago.
That's the one at Wembley.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome, right?
What a killer set list.
Oh, man, play basically everything you want to hear, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
And they are one of the very few bands that I've always been into that I never got a chance to see.
Oh, well, maybe you'll get a chance. City. I mean, I didn't until a year or two ago.
Oh, so you did get to go.
Yeah, and I never would have dreamed that would ever happen. So, it can happen. So
I had a chance. They played here in the New York area, but man, like tickets were astronomical. And it just, I made the decision. It's like, you know what? I'm not spending like $300 to go see ELO as much as I want to go see him, to get a decent set.
Save your $300 for Genesis.
Yeah, I'm not doing that either. I caught them in 2007. That was a lot of fun. I'm not doing that again.
Yeah, cool. Well,
I'm not going to sit and watch Phil in a wheelchair. Yeah, it's
bucket list for me. So I'll take what I can get.
Oh, if you haven't gone, you need to go. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a prog head like me, and I've never seen those three in the flesh.
Yeah,
I'll take.
No, then you have to go. If I didn't go in 2007, I would probably be going. But I caught them then, and I'm happy I did. Now, the prospect of watching Genesis with Phil sitting in a chair or a wheelchair or whatever it is through the whole show. I don't want that to be my last memory, but if you don't have any concert memories, you should go because I'm sure it's going to be fine. I'm sure
it'll still be a very professional show.
Yeah, he's got his son playing drums, I think, right?
Yeah, son Nick.
And is Daryl going to be a part of this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean that's a good thing right there. So
yeah, it'll be quality, even if it's all tuned down 2 steps.
Yeah, well, and you'll only get 3 or 4 gigs lyrics. Yeah, that's what are you gonna do?
What can you say?
Yeah,
but just glad to see they're still kicking.
Yeah, what maybe the final time, right? Who knows?
I would surmise it probably will be.
Yeah, it's a shame they can't just crank out a studio album just for the hell of it, one last time.
Yeah, that would be something they could do at their leisure.
Yeah. Never say never.
Right. And write all the songs in a comfortable key and no one would ever know the difference.
Yeah. I'm sure Phil can still sing. I mean, that's
I think so, especially in the studio where he has plenty of time to get the perfect take.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. But back to ELO.
Yes, back to ELO. So I don't know what the future holds. I would assume Jeff is going to kind of keep cranking out these albums every couple of years, I would assume, as long as he's making money doing it. So we'll see.
Yeah.
So everybody watching, as always, in the comments below, please list your favorite album from each decade in the history of the Electric Light Orchestra. And remember, there's no right or wrong answer here. It's all based on which ones we love and what we prefer. So thanks for watching. Sean, you want to plug what's coming up on your channel?
Oh, thanks. Swing by YouTube /Soul Night Live, SOAL Night Live. I have a musical talk show, not unlike Pete's. And I interview a lot of prog rock musicians, fusion musicians, and classic rockers. Coming up, I'm going to be chatting with Phil Manzanera from Roxy Music, Derek Shulman from Gentle Giant, the California Guitar Trio, and we have a couple special themed shows also, one about the history of King Crimson coming up, and another one about the building blocks of Genesis music. We're going to look under the hood and see how that stuff's put together just in time for the tour. So
There you go.
please drop by and sub. I'd be very grateful.
There you go. Thanks everybody for going over there and clicking on that subscribe button and checking out Sean's stuff. And while you're at it, visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Coming up on the channel, we've got, let's see, Martin Popoff is in the house today. Actually, it is Friday morning, so look for another cool show from Martin. Actually, you're going to get 2 from us today. So Martin and I are doing part 2 of our favorite song endings, those songs that had a kick-ass final 30 seconds or a minute, right? So part 2 of that. And then by popular demand, and I still can't believe that 7 years on YouTube we haven't done this, our favorite band logos. So that's also coming up.
Neat. Very cool.
Yeah, well, that's a long time coming, right? It's just,
well, my vote for favorite ending is da 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 da.
And with that, for Sean Tonar, I am Pete Pardo. Take care, everybody.
Y'all take care.